Psychoanalysis tools, Oedipus. We start today a new series, rather a sub-series within psychoanalysis. And this series has to do with the whole idea and area of tools within psychoanalysis. Unlike CBT, REBT, psychoanalysis has been a very tool deficient, almost a tool avoiding discipline. In my opinion, this is not something admirable and has to be corrected by opening up this whole area of tool creation, tool testing, and dissemination of tools for therapists, for supervisors, for patients, for caregivers, and for public health in general. Psychoanalysis has never leveraged, really speaking, the power of tools. It has been too focused on what happens in the analytic hour. Today we open up this discussion on the whole area of tools, and then we move from this general discussion on tools within the context of psychoanalysis to a specific area, a specific problem of the Oedipus, and how tools can be used to advance the cause of healing the Oedipal problem. And similarly, tools can be used to heal, or rather advance the healing process, because it's not one factor that heals. There are many factors which heal, and one of the factors can be tools, which adds to the healing process, quickens it, occasionally can even deepen it. Tools can help us to address any classical problem that we come in psychoanalysis, be it the problem of the split, of envy, of greed, of Oedipus, of early life object loss, of absence of a good enough mother, of unhealthy self, of bottled up difficult feelings. We need to develop a inventory of tools, a basket full of them, to address each of these issues. And obviously for each issue, we need multiple tools, because some tool will work on somebody. When it comes to tools, we are back to the basic principle of holistic healing. Everything works on someone, nothing works on everyone. So we need a basket full of tools. So let's start first from a general discussion and then move to the specific problem of Oedipus and how tools can be of use in addressing this issue. So let us take a look at the wide area of psychotherapy and see which disciplines are open to using tools. Not only tools, but certain techniques where outside of the session, the work continues. CBT, REBT are good examples which are positive and open to the concept of homework. I would prefer to call it self-work that the patient does outside of the session, and both of them also are open to the use of tools that help therapists in addressing the issues of the patients. So if you talk about CBT for schizophrenia or CBT for depression, you would have some tools to help you. In general, we do make use of tools for psychological testing, but our discussion here is to tools which are for healing, not for testing. Psychoanalysis classically has always been homework-free and tool-free. And why so? There are certain reasons which go back to the early days of psychoanalysis, the days of its discovery, establishment, and early development. It is in those days certain things happened. And as these things happened, the area of tools never got positive encouragement or a positive consideration. The first reason why psychoanalysis is relatively homework free, I would prefer to call it self-work free and tool free, is because classically it developed as a therapy which was 5 days a week. And if the patient is coming every day to the therapy session, then there is little time left for him to go back and do any homework, and therefore there is little incentive for you to devise a standardized homework or some tool that the person can go back and use on himself. So instead of standardized tools, all that got developed was certain verbal skills, certain skills to focus on certain parts and not focus on certain parts, certain skills to look into the unconscious dynamic of something. And these skills were developed in supervision. But first point to consider is this, that because it was 5 days a week, the question of homework and the tools was not a very important question. Today, however, it's very rare to find anybody willing to come 5 days a week, except for candidates in psychoanalytic or psychotherapeutic training or psychodynamic training. It's hard to find anybody ready to come 5 days a week for a long period of time. Practically, as it stands, even candidates in training don't take more than 3 days a week, 75% of time. And if you talk of patients, it's very difficult for patients today to come more than twice a week. In extreme situations, one can come thrice a week. If one is doing online, possibly one can more easily come 3 times a week online. But 5 days a week, even online, is difficult. No question of doing it offline. So now that offline, you cannot do more than once or twice a week. And online, at best, you can do 3 times a week. And many patients, given the time and the money constraints, can go for only once a week or twice a week. That being the situation, what used to be true in early days of psychoanalysis of 5 days a week is no longer true today. And if we are looking at twice a week or once a week, then it is a very different situation than the early days of psychoanalysis. And this situation creates a long gap between 2 sessions. And that is where the idea of do-it-yourself tools and do-it-yourself self-work, that becomes important. Second important point is psychoanalysis classically relied upon the heat which was generated in the session to keep it only within the session and not to allow it to dissipate outside. And this was very important when you were coming 5 days a week or you were coming 3 days a week, especially if they were 3 continuous days. Whole focus there was to bring everything from everywhere into the session. Clients talk about collecting transparencies. In fact, everything got collected. Everything that was outside in life was brought in some way, literal or metaphorical, into the session. And the whole reliance then was on the psychoanalytic process, the power of insight and catharsis. And that if this were happening fine, the natural healing process will take care of the rest. This was the second reason why it was never thought of to develop tools or to develop the whole area of self-work. One exception comes to my mind of Girindra Shekhar Bose, the father of Indian psychoanalysis, who used to make use of self-work in a different way. It would almost be called a homework in CBT. He would ask his clients, his patients, to go back and read certain pages from certain books of psychoanalysis, often from books of Freud. But after him, I don't think there have been exceptions on those lines. The third reason why it is so is the way Freud himself was. Freud was primarily a theoretician, and I would say a fundamental technician, but not a, how do you put it, not an application software technician. So if you look at the computer hardware and the operating system and the operating softwares, Freud was interested primarily in the operating system and not primarily in the application software. So he was not in that sense a technician, except for one exception, that he created the fundamental technique of psychoanalysis. But after creating the fundamental technique of psychoanalysis, and to that extent he was a master technician, but after that he was not really a technician, he was more of a theoretician rather than a technician. Later on, people came who used Freud's theory to develop many techniques, which included child therapy, which included play therapy, which included art therapy, which were based on Freud's theory, but they were able to develop sort of application software, so to say, in the area of psychotherapy. So this was a third reason, that except for the fundamental technique of psychoanalysis, Freud was not interested in the technique part, in creative use of his theory. Rather, he was more interested in developing the theory itself. The fourth reason was, given what Freud was and what he liked and disliked, it became an unsaid taboo to get into the area of tools or to try out radically different technique. None of Freud's disciples could dare to try out an art therapy or a psychodrama therapy. So in the early days, very soon it became a taboo to look forward to anything radically different than what Freud was doing. And that included tools and techniques. So that was the fourth reason why this area of tools did not develop in the early days of psychoanalysis. And then it continued because of the sheer power of orthodoxy that had established itself in psychoanalysis. Fifth reason was the whole enterprise of psychoanalysis was focused on and believed in the analytic hour and what happens between the two in the therapy room. Psychoanalysis never went deeply into anything that was do it yourself, which would include self-work or tools given to the patient to do even in the presence of the therapist. So all of that was taboo. Psychoanalysis would not go into the whole area of the group. So in early days, group therapy or any group activity to help the patient, it may be an art activity, it may be social work, but any group activity to help the patient was put aside as a taboo. Use of art therapy, spirituality, spiritual techniques, spiritual concepts, all of this, that was a blasphemy. It was a heresy. So this was a very important fifth reason why this whole area of tools and alternative techniques or creative techniques never got developed in early days. And then once the early days ended, the later days more or less mimicked the early days. There was too much of conformity, too much of castration, too much of the fear of the paternal. Contrary to popular belief, which thinks of psychoanalysis as a subversive tradition, the irony about psychoanalysis is it's very confirming in subversion and confirming and subverting in a very limited sense. So it is very narrowly focused on a particular kind of subversion and very orthodox about that subversion. So there is a closeness on a particular form of openness and a particular range of openness. So it's a very strange kind of a discipline that on one hand it's subversive and iconoclastic, on the other hand it's extremely confirming and extremely loyal and devoted and completely non-ready to try out anything creative, radically different from its core tradition. So in that sense, psychoanalysis is a very traditional discipline, contrary to popular belief. And the sixth reason was a natural limit on courage and imagination of the early important players in the psychoanalytic movement. And given these reasons, the whole area of tools and creative techniques did not develop in psychoanalysis for a long time. However, outside of psychoanalysis, this whole area of tools and creative techniques using the principles of psychoanalysis developed in the form of psychodrama, art therapy, emotion-centered therapy, and more than a few dozen other forms of therapy, which were essentially using the principles of psychoanalysis, but very creatively, developing tools, techniques, frames, contexts in which the patient can enter and advance the cause of healing. One more reason why the area of tools and techniques did not develop in psychoanalysis is related to the kind of conceptual and academic background and experiential background that early important figures of psychoanalysis had. Very few of them were deeply trained in spirituality or philosophy or mysticism or any form of art. Most of them came with a very non-spiritual, non-mystical background. Only exception I can think of is Jung, where he had not only interest but quite a conceptual capability in a variety of areas, including mythology, literature, philosophy. Jung, however, was moving too fast from one discovery to another, and he did not have that patience and the composure to sit with one concept, go deep into it, and convert it or develop related to it some standardized tools that everyone can use, and then put those tools to empirical testing. Jung was completely a different kind of person, not the composed, cool-headed person who would go patiently into it. I call him man on a motorcycle who keeps moving from one area to another, from one discovery to another. So these are some of the reasons why tools and techniques, alternative creative techniques in psychoanalysis have traditionally not developed. Now, when I say tools, what do I mean? What are the different types of tools? We can look at three categories of tools. Tools which can be used in the therapy session. Second category, tools which can be used by the patient outside of the therapy session. And third, tools which can be used in the group context, in the context of group therapy or in the context of a support group. Tools to be used in therapy can be tools which are for the therapist or which are to be given to the patient in the course of therapy during the therapeutic hour. Second is do-it-yourself tools which the patient can use while he is alone. One category, subcategory. Second subcategory is the caregivers can help the patient engage with the tools. Third is if there are some assistant healers, somebody who is helping the patient with Reiki or pranic healing or yoga as a part of the holistic healing process, certain tools that the patient can engage with along with the assistant healers, or certain tools the patient can engage with while he is in groups. It can be a support group, it can be a discussion group, it can also be a professional group that's trying to help him. The third category of tools is those tools which essentially are to be used in groups. So these can be general tools to be used in group therapy. It can be tools which involve the use of technology to be used in groups, or it can be tools which are rooted in spirituality and can be used in the groups. So you have three different broad categories of tools, and in each category you have subcategories. So we can see the context in which the tool is being used would demand that the tool be of a particular type. So the tools which are for use in therapy will be radically different from the tools which are for do-it-yourself context and the tools which are to be used in groups. And all the tools, of course, have to be creatively developed, empirically tested, and refined over a period of time. Continuing with the tools. One category of tools is those tools which are without using digital technology. And then we can have another category of tools which is using the digital technology. And when we talk of using the digital technology, there are three important areas which one can leverage. The area of games, computer games, area of films, and the area of virtual reality. Virtual reality, of course, is the most potent area, especially in issues of phobia or issues of fetish. This has not been fully explored, this whole area of games, films, virtual reality for psychotherapy. And then there is this whole area of psychedelics. How psychedelics can be used as a tool and in association with other tools. In ISTDP and in some other areas, I think research is going on how to reduce the resistance to healing using psychedelics. And then there are tools which are in the domain of art therapy and psychodrama, which can be used by psychoanalysis. They are very powerful tools. And one point of tools and techniques, if you are following CBT, your tools will be of a different nature. And if you are following psychoanalysis, the tools will be of a different nature. And if you are following ISTDP, tools will be of a different nature. So the tools in a way are definitely a function of the technique you are following. So this also is an important consideration in development of the tools. How does holistic healing fit into this? One very important element is the element of relaxation. It's like a goal state. Any person with a psychological difficulty has usually the difficulty of relaxation. My teachers used to say, if anyone has a serious psychological issue, either food, sleep, or sex, something has to be disturbed. That may be a partial truth, but definitely relaxation is one of the goals, and tools for relaxation can be given to the patient. If necessary, once or twice can be tried in the therapy setting to help the patient learn it. Or if one is into a holistic healing format, somebody else can help the patient in relaxation on a regular basis. So there are tools for relaxation are a very important basket of tools for the healing process. Tools for homework or self-work, I should actually correct it to self-work. Tools related to pranic healing, Reiki, crystal healing, and each of these areas has many tools which help us fill the basket. Tools related to yoga, which can be pranayam or practices or physical exercises, asanas, or spiritual tools, which include spiritual practices or related to idol therapy, group meditation like AUM or other OSHO meditations or Vipassana meditations, and the use of mantras, often associated with visualization and certain rituals. The whole package that comes from Tantra. So these are This is another area from which tools have to be collected and put in the context of psychoanalysis. Now, how do you get into tool creation? What is necessary? To create a tool, you need a very good knowledge of a particular school for which you are creating the tools. Because, say, for example, if you are looking at a Cohesian school, you are not going to focus upon the split. You are going to focus upon what are the problems which result in creation of an unhealthy self, and how do you develop tools to address each of these issues. So knowledge of the school for which you are developing the tool, experience of therapy, your own creativity, and once you using this, you develop a tool, you empirically test out, and then disseminate to a wider community who uses it, gives feedback, and the collective wisdom finalizes the tool. A very big area of developing the tools is in the area of technology, where for issues related to gradual exposure, use of virtual reality, psychedelics, hypnosis, and spiritual practices, which are monitored using technology, all of this put together creates another area, a very big area for constructing new tools. Does creating a basket of the tool be the end of supervision? How does it relate to supervision? Is it the end of supervision? Of course, no. Because a supervisor does many things. He provides conceptual knowledge, he shares experience, and occasionally also shares tools. Without using the word tools, he may share a tool of intervention, a tool of communication, which in an informal sense he has empirically tested out on a smaller sample, or has learned from others or discussed with others that it works. So it's a pre-vetted tool in some sense that he shares. He also gives forewarning of what can go wrong with a particular patient or the danger the therapist is putting himself into in a particular situation. So supervision is more than just giving tools. So will it end supervision? No. Rather, it's an empowering thing. Basket full of tools, because tools will be of different sophistication. There will be tools which will be understood and efficiently used by students, by those into advanced levels of training, by young therapists, and by supervisors. So there are different layers of sophistication and complexity of tools. The understanding and use of the tool is not independent of the conceptual grasp of the subject, of the experience of that area. So everyone cannot understand and use all the tools. Which tool to use when, of course, remains a question of experience. So this whole area of this whole development of tools actually empowers the patient, empowers the therapist, and empowers the supervisor. It does not take away anything from anybody. It's a universally empowering, because tools will be of different complexity and different sophistication. Coming to the area of Oedipus. Till now, we discussed in general about the tools. What is a tool, what the history of non-development of tools in psychoanalysis, the process to develop a tool, the categories of tools and supervision. A general discussion we did till now. Now let us get into the specifics, and now onwards we will get into specifics of tool development and deployment for very specific problems that we find in psychoanalysis. So we will have today a discussion on Oedipus. After that, we'll have a discussion on split. After that, creation of a healthy self. After that, on envy and so on. So each important problem in psychoanalysis we'll take up and discuss about how we can go about tool development in that area. And this, of course, will be an outline discussion because the real tool development is an extremely creative process followed by an empirical process. So I will give an outline discussion. I will also give some hints. I'll also give some tips, so to say. And I think by end of a year or two, we should have some really standardized tools addressing each of these problems. So how do we go about creating tools to address the Oedipus? The first problem is to be clear about the context and the objective of the tool. And if the objective is clear that we have to heal the Oedipus, how do we reach that situation? Let us say a person has come for obsessive compulsive issue. And the person has been in analysis, has done free association, has submitted some dreams, shared some dreams. It is now clear, let us say, to the therapist that the cause of the obsession is fixation in the Oedipus, the non-resolution of Oedipus. Let us say this is clear. The therapist can talk to a supervisor or maybe a couple of supervisors, and at the end of it, it's very clear that fixation in the Oedipus is the problem leading to obsession, and so that has to be healed. Now that this objective is clear and the context is, it is difficult to break ice and open up a discussion on Oedipus. We are, let us say, in the context of a very conventional conservative society. Say it is India. How do you break this topic? So it's a taboo, but it is central to healing. So what is central to healing is difficult to discuss. So let us approach this problem and see what tools we can use to help the person. So the first thing is we are clear the suffering is because of Oedipus. 2, we are clear it is a taboo. The cause of the suffering is a taboo. We can't easily talk about it. 3, it is clear that what is involved in the Oedipus is sexuality, anger, shame, guilt, and object loss. It may also be in some cases that the pre-Oedipal pathology may lead to non-resolution of the Oedipus, and there may be a split open leading to omnipotence, idealization, de-idealization, a paranoid schizoid flavor of phenomena that makes resolution of Oedipus even more difficult. And if this is the core difficulty that resists the healing process, then the question is, how do we heal this core difficulty? And we cannot heal unless we start a discussion. So the question translates into, how do we start the discussion? So can we create a standardized tool to help therapists start the discussion, which can then be refined by others, and over a period of time we can develop a basket of tools for approaching and healing Oedipus, which can be used by therapists. This is usually the way the context for a tool would be. Now let us look at practically what can be done. What can be the real tool? Before we put into use any tool or we try to make any intervention, if we are dealing in a very conservative society, it's better to take consent, if or not to explore the sexual aspect of life, especially if the gender of the therapist and the patient is different. Let's say the consent is there, then what can be done? So let me say tool zero. Tool zero would be to lay the background, because we know ultimately we have to get into the Oedipus. We can start with general classical analysis and in that make some general comments, like saying the unconscious can think anything, even if socially not acceptable. Or one can say something in the third person, that you mentioned about your friend, it seems he has some strange fantasies, or he is very experimental, or he is very open to breaking taboos. So in the third person, maybe the patient opens up. And this can create a background to slowly get into difficult discussion. Apart from this general classical analysis and creating a background by general comments, by third person, by humor, by saying something with plausible deniability, to later on say, no, I did not mean this, I meant X, or something of that sort, which is coupled with humor. Apart from those general things, what therapy tools can be developed or used? So let us divide the therapy tools to address Oedipus in therapy, to address Oedipus into three parts. Tools to be used in therapy, tools to be used in self-work, and tools that can be used in group context. First, tool one, let's say tools to be used in the therapy context. Tool one, asking the person to get to report his dreams and expecting that in the dreams something Oedipal literally comes up. Or asking the person associations related to something which is depicting an Oedipal element in the dream and showing it by association that it might be this. Can it be this? Or rather saying, can it be this? So dream analysis is one tool to get into Oedipus. And of course, after creating the background, as we said before. Tool two, asking the person for his fantasies and expecting something comes up from there. Tool three, the kind of pornography the person reads or watches on video. Tool four, talking about a third person who is very flexible and open about entering the taboo spaces in the area of thought and fantasies. And tool five, analyzing the feelings the patient has in the context of triangles. This is one set of 5 tools. And of course, we should have 50 tools in this area, not only 5. I think if we all put together our tools from our experience and creativity and empirically validate, and with collective wisdom create a basket, it will lead to a whole area, psychoanalytic toolology. That be in future, but this can be first set of tools to be used in therapy to address the Oedipus. So the question for therapists often is, we know it is the Oedipus, how do we break it open? How do we bring it into discussion? So this can be approaches to get to the discussion of Oedipus. Second category, the self-work tools. Tool 1 can be active imagination. give a subject to the person or take a part of the dream of a person or of the day fantasy of the person and ask him to develop it. And in that active imagination, something can come up. Tool 2 is go into the sexual exploration, sexual fantasy exploration of the person. Tool 3 is to ask the person what kind of women does he like and try to bring up if he is unconsciously seeking replacement for the Oedipal object. So these can be some of the self-work tools which can help slowly get into the discussion of the Oedipus. One self-work tool, as I said before, can be of, as Girindra Shekhar Bose used to do it, ask the person to read something, and in that reading, this may be a part of the reading. The Oedipal theorization can be a part of that reading. We have to be very careful here because in very conservative societies, if you give this kind of reading, it's very common that the patient may, if he's very orthodox and not very educated, can easily think the therapist is a pervert. That can turn the whole situation into a very difficult and embarrassing situation. Then we can have group tools. Tool 1 can be somehow to give a silent suggestion to the patient, or if the patient is open enough, a direct discussion, that it would help him to be a part of the any group discussion which is discussing on the king subjects. It will help him open up his mind and be more flexible on the taboo subject. Tool 2 can be a group discussion on psychoanalysis, Freud, or Google statistics on pornography. So this can be, if you are doing group therapy, these are some of the tools which can use to slowly get into the Oedipus. Tool 3 can be mythological stories, which can have an Oedipal component. So these are like preparation tools to slowly get into the discussion of the Oedipus, which otherwise without these tools would take a very long time. So with these tools, one can get into the discussion in say 10 sessions, which otherwise would take 100 sessions to get into discussion of. And in some cases, we can never get into discussion of. So this quickens up the healing process, reduces suffering, reduces cost and time, and helps the same therapy see and help more patients, which is very important in a country like India with very few good therapists. Thank you.